Hello, this is a diagram of the psyche. What we're seeing here is that we have our experience divided into three levels. 1, 2, and 3. 3 levels of consciousness, and this lower level is the lower unconscious or the pre-personal. This is where a lot of our early programming is stored, always ready to insert itself into our consciousness, the orange-yellow center of the egg. The middle unconscious is all of the material. It's your phone number, all the stuff you aren't thinking about right now, but you could draw up easily. It's also the patterns that often define our lives. When we say something like, "I'm freaking out," probably what is happening is that the patterns that exist here, how to be the good boy, girl, how to work well in the world, how to not be the good boy, the good girl, to be compliant, they're all there. If we use an example of a cop pulling you over when you're driving too fast, you can tell me or predict how you might react. Or if your boss says, "Come into my office, young man or woman," you can predict how you will act. This is a pattern that is just well enough embedded in your middle unconscious. It's probably not acting out right now, but you can tell me how it would act under certain circumstances. Your higher unconscious is where purpose, meaning, and value exists and comes through. The edges of the egg, this is the collective unconscious, that area that Jung most fully elaborated. That which we share as a species, and it's this area that can deeply affect us also. Because when we're talking about deliberating on a certain act, something we want to pull off or do, change careers, change jobs, whatever, we may pull from the history of humanity, pull from our dreams or archetypes that have no conscious, justifiable, logical rationalization, but that they present themselves to us nonetheless. So this is our consciousness, and in the middle of our consciousness, in the middle right here, is the self. And I usually write it out with a capital S. In case you're wondering, the shadow can exist at all levels, both in the yucky parts down here, or the transpersonal, and the more unconscious it is, the more of the shadow it relates. The yucky pile of who we are, we push away. However, we also end up pushing away our greatness. So it's important that shadowed parts of ourselves come into deliberation also. If we have down here a scared child, trauma related, anything that gets embedded, a child's subpersonality, and we are standing at the brink of falling into the universe's arms, we need to be sure that we are the holding environment, the self is, for that scared kid, or it's going to keep us holding on by our fingernails and not letting us move into a proper choice point. Likewise, if we hear this beautiful transcendent call to step into our own passion, but everything in the middle unconscious tells us not to do it, people are starving, why would you quit your job? It's good money. Deliberation stage in the act of will allows us to listen to what is important there. So the self as we see it in here in the middle unconscious, the self we define as contentless awareness and will. And it's hugely important to pay attention to contentless because that is the unstoried self. That is where we get to play outside of our lives and how our lives were defined for us, maybe down here in that pre-personal area, what have you. The higher self is that same self. This is our self down here in the lower unconscious, perhaps our self in the dark night of the soul, and this is our self at the kitchen sink, at the kitchen table, and our self at the top of the mountain, if you will. It's how we know ourselves beyond circumstance, beyond story in a situation we find ourselves. by reconnecting and disidentifying, being able to pull from that center of the egg. So in the process of deliberation, changing the big jobs, whatever the big life event is, we are asking ourselves, we have this call of self coming down, and we can feel it. But before we make a choice, yep, I'm going to quit that job and I'm going to go become a ballet dancer. Before we go out into the world, we are asking ourselves to hear more from the unconscious. The truly volitional act requires us bringing to light unconscious motives. And that's a quote by Jolie. So who has a stake in it here? Which subpersonality is saying, no, no, no? And which one is maybe saying, yes, 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 quit that great job, go become a ballet dancer. Just because you're a 45-year-old, slightly inflexible male doesn't mean anything. Move to Sweden and live that dream. Who knows, right? We want to listen to patterns in the middle unconscious, hear the calls that are coming from the higher self. Maybe the higher self tells us, wait, maybe it's not about being a ballet dancer. Maybe it's about expression, art, beauty, grace, dedication, something of that nature. And in that sense, we realize we have more options than we realized. We're not cementing our life into one form, a physical form of just becoming a ballet dancer. So this process of engaging the entire egg gives us more options. And if we pull from all areas, it's the process of making conscious, using all of our strengths, coming into alignment, being able to come to a choice point around things in our lives that aren't just being made from one limited part of the self. So I hope that clears up a little bit of an idea of what the egg diagram is, the process of psychosynthesis, being able to use all of these systems, that non-dualistic nature, to not overemphasize that the higher is better or the lower is less than, but to simply see the entire egg and to be able to disidentify enough and act from that truly volitional act, using the self as the holding ground, the observer in the middle, and bring in all of our parts to help make decisions towards these next steps in our lives. Okay, thanks for listening.